Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering, as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So, special guest Jim Marshall is back with us today to talk about Septemics. Welcome back, Jim.
Thanks, Carolyn. Pardon me. Thanks, Catherine. That's great to see.
Fantastic. Well, last time you were on, you spoke to us about how your exploration of the unexplainable and the mystery led you to exploring all these different aspects of what it is to be human and what it is to function as a human. And you developed Septemics, which is groundbreaking. And last time you were on, you gave us a really good story of your life and how you got to having created Septemics, and you spoke about it a little bit, but we didn't have time to go into it in any depth. So today, I'm very excited that you've come back on with a slideshow this time about Septemics. And I will just say to those who are listening, really do seek out the YouTube video of this episode and watch it, because you really have to see the scales for it to make sense. Or get the book, and we will remind you how to get the book towards the end. So, Jim, thank you again for coming on. Would you like to say anything about Septemics before we get going with your wonderful slideshow?
Well, I should say that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And today we're going to talk about some of the content of that book specifically.
Brilliant. So, Jim, actually, I'm very grateful to you for sharing this with us, because this material is incredibly valuable and you are generously giving it away in this conversation. So shall we get right to it?
Sure. Let me talk about the first slide, called Septemics Hierarchies of Human Phenomena, Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. That is what you get from Septemics. The ability to analyze, predict, and manage human affairs, which is something that really hasn't existed before in this context. That star there is the Septemic logo, and it tells you a lot about the subject. It's a 7-pointed star. The word septem in Latin means 7. Septemics means literally of or pertaining to 7. So there are 7 rays in the star. Each one is a different color. The rainbow, known as Roy G. Biv in the science world, is these colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And each ray is a different color, but between them, they make a spectrum. And that is what you get from each scale. So you get these 7 different manifestations, but they all add up to a full spectrum of analysis of this particular area of human phenomena.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a spectrum rather than a series of individual aspects that exist on their own.
Right.
It's
very much like when Isaac Newton shined the white light through the prism and he got a rainbow.
Yeah.
He got Roy G. Biv. So that is what I did, except it's on an intellectual level rather than on a physical level.
Right. Brilliant. Okay.
So now we'll go to the slide that says individual scales. Right. So there are individual scales and group scales. There are 35 Septemic scales. 24 of them are individual scales, meaning they apply to an individual. So the first scale we're going to look at is the scale of basic purposes. Slide number 3. Okay, this is the most important of the 35 scales. And the reason for that is this is the persistent trait. Most humans spend an entire life at one level of the scale. It is not easy to move up or down on this scale. Now, when I say easy, I put that in quotes because if you're going to change level on this scale, it takes something big to do it.
Right.
The most famous example of this is Saul on the road to Damascus, who in the New Testament had this transformational experience where he saw a bright light in the sky and a voice said to him, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he was knocked off his horse. And he then went from being Saul to St. Paul, became the spokesman for Christianity, and he is the person who spread Christianity to the Gentiles. So he went from level 2, which he was at, which was leader, up to saint. He became a saint at that moment. But it could also go the other way. If somebody is in a Nazi concentration camp and survives, it'll probably knock him down a level to whatever level he's at. Will go down one level, probably.
Could you explain that more? That last bit you said about the Nazi concentration camp.
That if somebody has some horrific traumatic experience,
Yeah.
Something a lot bigger than merely having a broken leg, like being captured by a torturer and held in captivity for a month and tortured for a month before the police find you, that might be big enough to knock you down one level.
You mean a traumatic experience could knock you down a level in relation to your basic purpose in life?
That's right.
Right. Well, that's very disturbing, isn't it?
Yes. So that is why when you see people who come out of prison or come out of concentration camps or come out of oppressive situations where they're held in captivity one way or another, they're not the same. They're purposely.
So this is like what someone might refer to as that they're damaged or wounded by it, and
Yes.
that's affected them at a fundamental level.
There are volatile scales and there are stable scales. Volatile scales are ones on which you can move quickly and easily.
Yeah.
There are some scales, for example, the scale of evaluation, people move on that by the minute. It doesn't take much to move somebody up or down there. This scale is the opposite extreme where it takes a lot. So that most people never change on this scale. And that is a benefit to the reader because if you find somebody on this scale, he's probably going to stay there for the rest of his life, which means you know all about him.
Right.
So, for example, I know Donald Trump's level on this scale. And so I have a very deep understanding of what he's trying to do. It hasn't changed at all. I've been following Donald Trump for 50 years because I'm a New Yorker. And he was in the news every day in New York. So I know his basic purpose. I've known him for a long time. And I'm not going to tell anybody what it is because that's unethical. But it helps me to really understand. I know where he's coming from. He's not going to behave like Abraham Lincoln, who was at level 2. It's a different type of person. So, in other words, you can see somebody, you don't see somebody for 20 years, right? You go to a class reunion, see that he's still at that level. Good old Joe, he's still at level 4. So that is a benefit to you because it really tells you what you can expect from this person because, as I said, most people do not move on this scale.
Right.
Now, as far as moving up, if you have somebody who meditates for 40 years, cumulatively, that might be enough for him to move up.
Yeah. So this scale of basic purpose, I think it'd be helpful perhaps for people who are watching and listening, if you would just explain to us what you mean by a scale and why you use the word scale for the...
Okay. So these 7 manifestations are in a distinct sequence, just like the colors of the rainbow. Orange always comes between red and yellow in the rainbow. And here, level 2 leader is always between level 1 saint and level 3 winner. It's a sequence. It's got a top and a bottom. So there's the lowest level and the highest level. And once you find somebody's level on any scale, there's the possibility of him moving up to the next level. Now, on most of the scales, that's not terribly difficult to do. On this one, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And part of that is because if you look at the little plus and minus that's next to the name of the level, that plus and minus doesn't mean good or bad. It means inflow or outflow. So this is a reversal polarity. So a saint, that minus means he's inflowing. It is an inflow level. You see, the purpose of the saint is to transcend. That is an inflow. He's not outflowing, he's withdrawing. So I should explain inflow, outflow, and reach and withdraw. On a physical science level, it makes more sense to say inflow, outflow. Like, for example, the electricity in your alternating current line, it flows one way for 60th of a second, flows another way for 60th of a second. So it's inflow, outflow. Or the blood in your heart flows in and flows out. But as far as human phenomena, it makes more sense to say reach or withdraw. So reach is an outflow and withdraw as an inflow. So a saint is withdrawing. He's withdrawing from the real world. That is what transcend means. Whereas a leader is on an outflow. His purpose is to conquer. That is definitely outflowing.
Okay. When you say the real world, do you mean the physical world?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay. Because some people would say that transcendence is coming more into alignment with what is real in a more spiritual or esoteric sense.
Well,
but
this
not
is
necessarily in a physical sense.
right. This is human phenomena. So these scales are naturally occurring delineations of how phenomena occur with humans.
Yeah.
So every person is at some level on every scale. So every human has one of these 6 basic purposes. And whatever you call it, it fits the scale. So in other words, you might not want to say conquest. You might want to use a different word, or you might not want to say leader. You might want to use a different word. You might want to find a synonym. Now, I spent 25 years finding what I think are the right words in English.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why people connect with this very well, because I found the right words. And these are not obvious at all. For example, if you look at level 6, the purpose of a criminal is pleasure. His best purpose is to have pleasure. So if you go amongst the criminal population, you'll see they're all into drugs, alcohol, sex, food, anything that's pleasurable. Ever notice how many fat people are in the mafia?
I'm afraid I don't know anyone in the mafia, so I can't go.
Well, there are hundreds and hundreds of movies and TV shows about them. And there's always a very, very high percentage of the members who are obese.
Right.
They eat a lot because pleasure is what they're into. So if it's not food, it's something else. Now that is not obvious, but that is what motivates them.
Right.
That is the purpose, and that is an important distinction between the criminal and the subversive. The purpose of the subversive is destruction.
Mm.
See, the criminal does not particularly want to kill you, but he will if you get in his way. So he wants to make this drug deal so that he can get $1 million to buy whatever he wants so that he has pleasure. And if you get in his way, he will kill you. He doesn't particularly want to kill you. The subversive, his purpose is to destroy. It's a different way of thinking. Now, the criminal is on an outflow, the subversive is on an inflow. The subversive, see, destruction, he's sort of pulling in destruction on himself.
Yeah.
An inflow. Whereas the criminal is like exploding out into the society.
Yeah.
So criminals, they use bullets and knives and things like that, which is definitely an outflow. And that's, again, difference between the two, and why it's a big deal to change level, because you have to completely reverse polarity.
Yeah.
Which is something that is understood in Eastern philosophy.
Mm. Yes. Because of course in some Eastern philosophy they talk about having a fundamental purpose that exists through many lifetimes, but then within each lifetime you may have different expressions of that.
Yes, again, this is human phenomena. As soon as you go outside the physical universe, into the native state of the spirit, there is no matter, energy, space, or time.
Yeah.
So that is a spiritual existence. That is the native state of the being. The state of being a human is extremely unnatural to the spirit. The spirit's natural state is to be in a place where there's no matter, energy, space, or time.
Yeah.
And he just is being who and what he is, whatever that is for him.
Yes, yes. And thank you for really emphasizing that these scales are human scales as opposed to any kind of attempt to encompass the physical incarnation along with the spiritual life.
Right. Yeah.
So it's that's a really very useful distinction.
Yeah. So this is a very big subject. If you read the book and understand it, you'll see there are 35 scales. It covers human phenomena in a way that nothing else does that I know of.
No, I don't think. Well, it's different. It's unique as far as I know. This particular thing, and also, we're still on the first scale of 35, and you said this is the most important one.
Right.
Say some more about that.
Well, it's your basic purpose, because once you find your level on this scale, it is a life-changing moment. You say, I see what I'm about. You throw out the other 6 levels. They are not for you. You are at that level. You know what your life is about. And that brings a level of clarity that most people do not have. Most people are stumbling and bumbling and fumbling with things like this. And so they go down an awful lot of dead-end roads because they don't know one's own basic purpose. When you know your own basic purpose, your whole life makes sense to you as a unit.
Okay, so supposing so number 5 here, which is loser, it says the objective is suffering.
Right.
So let's say somebody looks at the scale and they realize that is their basic purpose. That's where they are. How is that helpful for them to see that?
Well, the guy might look and say, "Oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I was on drugs and I got off that. And now I'm a drunk. And, when I was a kid, my parents beat me up all the time. So he's had a life of suffering. That is his purpose. This is the type of person who, if you give him $50,000, he'll blow it in Vegas. If you give him a car, he'll crash it. If you give him a house, he'll burn it down. If you introduce him to a nice girl, they will break up. His purpose is to suffer, and he makes himself suffer. There's nothing that you can do to stop that because it is his basic purpose. And this is why socialistic schemes always fail, because 20% of the population intends to suffer. So the social worker comes along and says, I'm going to help this poor person. Oh, really? Lots of luck. He's not going to allow it.
Right. But coming back to my question,
Yes.
let's say that guy looks at the scale and goes, oh yeah, look, that's the loser. My purpose is suffering.
Yeah.
How does that assist him?
First of all, it explains his whole life. He says, now I see what's going on. If I was in jail, and then I got out of jail, then I became a drug addict, then I got up, then became a drug. See, he sees he's making himself suffer, and his life then makes sense to him, and it opens the way for him to move up to level 4, which is a better way of life.
Right.
Because until you know what level you are at, you cannot get up to the next level. Because the basic rule here is you find the level you're at, and then you are empowered to move up to the next level. Because it is the next level up.
Yeah.
It is not that hard. See, if you're at level 5, and you try to get to 1, 2, or 3, you will fail because it's too steep a gradient. But if you try to get to 4, you will get there because it's the next level up.
Right. And on this level 4 is normal with an objective of conformity. So I can see how that transition could really make sense.
Yes.
But the loser is going to have to recognize he's at that place and accept it, and not just take that as another reason to suffer. Like I was suffering, but now I'm really suffering because I've realized that I'm a loser with a purpose of suffering. Somebody could use that to reinforce their determination to suffer.
That's right. And that dovetails perfectly with one of the axioms of the subject, which is that when a person is high in any scale, it's because he's insightful in that area.
Yeah.
When a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. So when a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, he has trouble with that scale. If you were to show this to Adolf Hitler, he wouldn't look at it and say, oh, I can see I'm at level 7. My purpose is to destroy. That would not happen.
No.
Would not have the insight to do that. And so this tells you something. If you show somebody a scale and he can't get it, that tells you he is out or near the bottom of that scale. The only other possibility is that he doesn't understand the words. Now, I do have a glossary, not only in front of each chapter, but also in front of the introduction. So I go out of my way to define the terms for you to minimize the semantic barrier.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. But presumably, if someone is low on one scale, they may be high on another scale.
That's right. They may. There are people who are generally downscale and people who are generally upscale. Less than 1% of humanity is at or near the top of all the scales. A larger percentage, I would say about 4%, is at or near the bottom of all the scales, which is why the world looks the way it does.
Right.
So let me talk further about the structure of this. So that dotted vertical line, that is the axis. That is what this scale is measuring. When you have a scale, you have to say, a scale of what? What is this scale measuring?
Yeah.
Right? Like you could have a yardstick or you could have a meter stick. They're similar, but they're marked differently. So you have a meter stick that's marked in centimeters. So you're measuring something differently. Now, what you're measuring here is at the top, courage, wisdom, and ethics, and at the bottom, fear, stupidity, and criminality. So as you move up the scale, there's less fear, less stupidity, less criminality. And as you move down the scale, there's less courage, less wisdom, less ethics. So a saint is a person who has courage, wisdom, and ethics.
Yeah.
Not too many of those around.
Yeah.
Subversive is somebody who has fear, stupidity, and criminality. Fortunately, there's an even smaller number of those.
Yeah.
So that is what this scale is measuring.
Fascinating.
So that tells you that the normal is sort of in the middle. You know, he doesn't have a lot of courage. He doesn't have a lot of wisdom. He doesn't have a lot of ethics. Now, that is the largest group. It's almost 30% of the population. And so that is what you see when you look at the general population. The person is not too fearful, is not too stupid, he's not really a criminal, but he's also not terribly courageous or wise or ethical.
Right. Yeah. He's human.
Right. Now, on the right, this scale has these subcategories which break down. Level 1 and 2 are what I call superhumans.
Yes.
They're humans, but they have powers and abilities that most of us are never going to have no matter what we do, because we're not at those levels. Subhuman is level 6 and 7. These people are humans, but the things they do are what could easily be described as some human. You know, these are terrorists, traitors, torturers, professional criminals, dictators, people like that are subhumans. Yeah. And the largest group, of course, is in the middle, human, levels 3, 4, 5. That's the human range. So when you find somebody who's really horrible, very fearful, very stupid, very criminal, he's a subhuman. And when a person has a lot of courage, wisdom, and ethics, he's a superhuman.
Right.
Now, distinguishing between the saint and the leader is not hard because the flow is opposite. The saint is on a withdrawal. See, he's withdrawing from life. He doesn't want money or power or fame. He wants to transcend, and if he's a Buddhist, he'll say he wants to attain nirvana. If he's a Christian, he'll say he wants to go to heaven. See, that's just a cultural norm. But the same point of transcendence, as opposed to the leader. The leader is going to conquer, like Winston Churchill was at level 2. He was going to conquer the Nazis. He did not want to make peace with them. If it weren't for Hitler, the English would have surrendered because the Germans wanted to make peace with the English. Hitler did not want to break up the English Empire. He did not want to harm the English. The English attacked Germany because Germany attacked Poland.
Yeah.
And the real conflict here was between Hitler, who was a subversive, and Churchill, who was a leader. Those two men despised one another. Hitler referred to Churchill as a drunk, which is correct. He was an alcoholic. He would drink a quart or a fifth of alcohol every day. So, you know, they were dismissive of one another. And if Chamberlain had remained prime minister, the English would have surrendered. Everything was going that way.
Yeah.
And it was Churchill who said his famous speech, "We will fight in the streets, we will fight on the beaches, we will fight in the cities," whatever it was. I forget the exact words.
We will fight on the beaches was part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
We will never surrender.
Yeah.
That's because his goal was conquest. He was a leader. A leader is on a big outflow.
Yeah.
And so he just persisted and persisted and eventually prevailed.
Yeah.
So you have superhumans, humans, and subhumans. So when you see somebody who has some spectacular abilities, you say, wow, that's a superhuman. Jesus, Gautama, Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln accomplished what was considered impossible at the time. He not only preserved the Union, but he also ended slavery. It was thought those two things could not be. You cannot end slavery and preserve the Union, was the conventional wisdom. And he did it. And he got almost no support from anybody. His generals wouldn't fight for him. His cabinet wasn't with him. If he had not found an obscure general named Grant who was willing to fight, and Grant's friend Sherman, he would not have been reelected. Lincoln would not have been reelected because the war was going badly. Because the people that were waging the war against the South, most of them were not leaders. They were concerned about feathering their own nests, which is level 3, or conforming. So, his ability as a leader is what made the Civil War go the way it did in America. So his abilities were, the more you study him, the more you realize how superhuman he was. This is a person who had at most 12 months of education total in his whole life. Born in a log cabin, and almost all experts rank him the greatest of all presidents. And if you read the Gettysburg Address and the second inaugural address, both of which he wrote himself in his own hand, which we have, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's what you get from a superhuman. And these horrible people, professional criminals and, terrorists, torturers, they're subhumans. So they have to be dealt with in a very different way. It has been known for 6,000 years at least. When you get somebody who's a subhuman, you just have to get rid of them one way or another. There's no rehabilitating those people. And if you talk to anybody in the mental health field, they will tell you that psychopaths and sociopaths do not make progress in therapy. Doesn't matter how good the therapist is. They're subhumans. So these are the people who, like, for example, Charles Starkweather in 1957 in the United States, he murdered 12 people in 10 days. Okay? They captured him. He was absolutely unrepentant. And they executed him, which was the right thing to do. That's what you have to do with somebody like that. I mean, if he didn't like you, he would just shoot you. So, this is, and you're saying, well, gee, that's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. The people at the bottom of these lists are crazy people. Now, notice at level 4, there's a horizontal line below which it says antisocial and above which it says social. So people at level 1, 2, and 3 are the social people. They do social things. And the people at 5, 6, and 7 are antisocial. They do antisocial things. They commit robbery. They rape people. They blow up buildings. Now, the normals, they're right at the dividing line. It's kind of half and half. They're not particularly social or particularly antisocial. Like if you talk to normal, say, don't you want to help humanity? He'll say, no, I just want to go on vacation for 2 weeks in the summertime. That's what his life is about. But he also doesn't want to hurt anybody. So he's really not terribly social or antisocial. But 5, 6, and 7 are antisocial. The antisocial, when you see somebody who behaves antisocially, he's at level 5, 6, or 7. That helps you identify him on this scale. When you see somebody who's social, But what does social mean? He is friendly with people. He does charity work. He has good rapport. These are all social things. So the truth is, about this entire book, it's not hard to spot people on these levels. For one thing, people tell you their level. If you listen to Hitler's speeches, which are on YouTube, you can see the destruction coming out of his mouth. It's all fear, stupidity, and criminality. It's very angry and hostile. That's destructive. As opposed to, if you listen to, for example, what Jesus had to say, it was very transcendent. So people tell you their levels, not only on this scale, on any scale. If you just shut up and listen, people will tell you their levels. So this is very useful material because it's not hard to spot people. For example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt and many of the presidents prior to him who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. It's once you know the material, you observe the person, it's there. You can see, what is this person doing? Questions?
No, I mean, I feel like you so many of the things that you're saying trigger for me reflection more than questions, because you're saying some very big things that, where my natural inclination is to reflect on them rather than to ask for more data, if you see what I mean. So you're providing a lot of data. Also, you've actually researched areas I know very little about. So, for example, all of these presidents and some of the histories of these wars and things like that, I haven't really looked into. And of course, probably like a lot of people, I have access to some information about what's happening today. But you've obviously looked at things over an extended period of time, and you've looked for patterns, and you've looked for algorithms, if you like, and consequences and things like that. And you've formulated that into a way of describing some of these patterns.
Right.
So to me, I feel like I'm being invited to examine some of these things from a new angle.
But
So it almost feels like, when someone says, if you cross your arms, there's a way you're accustomed to crossing your arms, and someone says, cross your arms the other way, it feels odd because it's different, but it's just as good. So that's a bit like that for my mind in listening to this and examining this. Because, of course, your structure is the one you've created. And, of course, it's not the same as my way of perceiving. Not that it contradicts either, but it provides a different way of looking in, which you often say that one of the purposes of this is for people to get greater awareness of themselves, to see themselves on the scales and get greater awareness of where they are, so that they then have the option to consider moving up the scale.
Right.
And
also awareness of others.
Say that again, sorry?
Also awareness of others, where others are on these scales.
Yeah.
Say something. I didn't create this. It's true, I wrote the book. These scales exist in nature the same way that Newton's 3 laws of motion exist in nature, the same way that the periodic table exists in nature. I absolutely guarantee you, and anybody in science and engineering will tell you this, if you go to an advanced planet, even in another galaxy, they're going to have some version of the periodic table.
Yeah.
The symbology will be different, but it's going to be laid out. The symbols won't make any sense to you, but you'll see that it will have the same structure, vertically and horizontally. Similarly, they know the 3 laws of motion. Similarly, they're going to have the Pythagorean theorem. They're going to know the formula for a circle, pi r squared. It's embedded in nature. So I just observed these and wrote them down. So I'm really the discoverer of the phenomena. And then I use that knowledge to craft this workable philosophic system in a way that will work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this really is not from my mind. It exists in the universe the same way that any other scientific thing does. It exists in nature. Uh, Fibonacci, the Fibonacci sequence, right? It's a mathematical structure, and it corresponds to nature's numbers. There are numbers in reality that exist. You know, you could look at a sunflower or a pine cone or a seashell, and it has Fibonacci numbers in it.
Yeah.
And he looked at these numbers and he said, there's something here about these numbers. And he was able to reverse engineer the formula out of those numbers and give it to us. And I basically did the same thing here. I looked at this data and I said, there's something here. And I put it together and wrote it down. And I'm giving it to people so they can use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Let me finish one thing about this scale. And under type, it says linear, quantum, general. So every scale is either linear or spiral. Now, a linear scale is what you would expect. It just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A spiral scale is one in which 7 links to 1. So it goes up in a spiral. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, going up or down. And there's an apparent congruency between 1 and 7. That does not apply in this scale.
Yeah.
This is a quantum scale, meaning there's nothing between these levels. In other words, you're either a leader or you're a winner. There's nothing between it. It's a quantum leap. So you'll find somebody, he's a winner. And then if he goes through some reverse the polarity, he's either going to go up to leader or down to normal, depending on whether it was a traumatic experience or an uplifting experience. There's nothing in between. It's a quantum. And general meaning it's not context driven. You do not have a level on the scale by a certain context. You have a general level. Once you find your level on the scale, you are done with that scale for yourself. You can then use it on your wife, your next door neighbor, your son, your boss, your associate, and then you find that person's level and then you're done. Now you can, of course, move up, which would be a beneficial thing, but it's not context driven. A specific scale, which stops the general, has a context. And you have to, it depends on what context you're talking about. So you could be at the same scale, 5 or 6 different contexts and have different levels for each. In this case, it's a general scale that doesn't apply.
Right. Understood. I suspect that someone's going to have to go over this stuff several times in the book.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there are sort of multifaceted ways of reading this information and actually gleaning from it the juice of what it is that you're saying. So,
right.
Yeah.
If you actually read the chapter, I go through all of this in excruciating detail. So I'm careful to explain it.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why this has to be a book, because you have to look at the scale and you have to read the text.
Yeah.
And you can go back and forth. You can read it. For example, it explains about the loser, and you can go back and look at the scale again. I see level 5. It's between this level and this. See, and then you go back and read the text again. So it's explicated pretty clearly in the book.
Yeah.
But you just have to study it. It's actually a textbook on an entirely new subject. So this is not a coffee table book. If you skip around in this book, you will not understand it. It's like studying any other technical subject. You have to start on line 1 and make sure you understand line 1 before you go to line 2. Make sure you understand line 2 before you go to line 3, and go through the whole book that way. It's very carefully structured. So if you follow the logic of the book, it will make sense to you. If you flip through a math text or physics text or chemistry text, it's not going to make any sense.
No, I understand. So does that also mean, therefore, that if someone's looking through the scales, it's important they start with this one and then go to the next one and then the next one?
Well, in terms of reading the book, I would say yes. The caveat, though, is the way to help someone with this who doesn't know anything about it is a person is having a particular problem and you show him a particular scale and get him to find his level on that scale, and he will have an epiphany, and that will help him to solve that problem.
Yeah.
So let's say if a guy's having a relationship problem, he doesn't know anything about this. You show him the scale of relationships, and you say, "Where is this relationship on the scale?" See, and he'll be interested in that because he's having this problem.
Yeah.
And he'll figure it out, and he'll have a realization, which will help him to improve his relationship.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully at that point, he will, of course, in most cases, more than one scale will apply. So you can then show him the scale of sexuality, which is probably going to be relevant. And I'll have the same experience where, scale of sexuality, find his level. I see what's going on. See, he has an epiphany. So in a romantic relationship, you might have 18 or 20 or 25 scales that all apply.
Yeah.
So he can go through and resolve this whole thing by studying where this relationship is on all these different scales.
Yeah.
And completely extricate himself from that problem using that method.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, Jim, shall we move on to another scale? Because we're going to be running out of time if we... So do you want to go on to the next one, or do you want to jump later in the next one? Okay. So the scale of personal influence. Is it fascinating?
Yes, so let me explain what I mean by personal influence. Now, if I were to hit you over the head with a club, that would have an influence on you, right? You would have a lump and you would perhaps go unconscious. That's not what I mean by personal influence.
Okay.
That's violent influence. So there are many ways of influencing people that are not personal. These are the personal ways of influencing somebody. So let's say you meet somebody, right? And you say, let's sit down and have a drink, right? So you go to the bar, you meet some guy in a hotel, you go to the bar, you sit down and you have a drink with him, right? So there is going to be some personal influence going both ways. You're going to have some influence on him. He's going to have some influence on you. Now, he's going to influence you in one of these 7 ways, and you're going to influence him in one of these 7 ways.
Right.
And you can look at a person, again, just observe the person, listen to the person, and see which one of these levels he's using. And it tells you a lot. You can spot the person. That tells you the person is high on the scale or low on the scale. For example, you have these people who influence people by martyrdom.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus did. He influenced the world by martyrdom. Well, that's level 7. That is the lowest level.
Right.
I don't recommend it.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, there are people who are going to do that.
Yeah.
So there are 7 different basic ways of influencing people. Now, you have to realize, you're going to say, no, there are thousands of ways. Yes, those are subsets of these. These are the 7 basic ways. So you can go through different people and see that they influence people in these different ways.
Okay, so looking at the one at the top, number 1, telepathy.
Right.
Say some more about that.
Okay. Well, these are people who influence you by telepathy. Now, there's a famous example in a movie. In the original Star Wars movie, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was a Jedi, and they had spiritual abilities. He's in the speeder with Luke, who's a kid, and these 2 robots. And they go to a city. But when they get there, the soldiers are there looking for them. The soldiers have already been told to find these 2 robots. So Obi-Wan Kenobi says, sotto voce, these are not the droids we're looking for. And the sergeant of the guard says, these are not the droids we're looking for.
I remember that piece, yes.
Okay, he influenced them by telepathy.
Right.
And Luke asked him about it, right? And he explained, well, people with weak minds can be influenced. Now, in the movie, they had him say the words because it's a movie, and if he just stood there, you wouldn't see anything.
Yeah.
But this goes on with people at level 1. They influence you by telepathy. So this is the guy. He meets some beautiful girl. He's interested in dating her, and he puts into her head, "You're going to invite me for tea." And she says to him, "Would you like to get together for coffee tomorrow?" He says, "Sure." He did that telepathically.
Right.
So telepathy is another way of saying will. Telepathy and will are the same thing. It's done by will. You will it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have an intention. This is the power of positive thinking. Okay? So at this level, you don't say or do anything. You just intend for the person to understand something or know something. So a good teacher has the intention that his students are going to understand him.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
If he has the intention, these are a bunch of dopey kids and they're not going to understand anything I say, well, to the extent that he has that intention there, some of that will carry over.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. Interesting choice of word. And I'm just going to read the others for people who are listening. So number 2 is charisma. Number 3 is reason. Number 4 is aloofness. Number 5 is domination. Number 6 is victimization. And number 7 is martyrdom that you mentioned before. Now, I think these make sense to me. I also feel like that, again, the chapter is probably very well worth reading because there's going to be a lot of depth to each of these, isn't there?
That's fair. There's a lot of explanation in the chapters, examples of all of these things.
Yeah, yeah.
So yes, this is a linear scale, meaning it just goes from 1 to 7. It's not a spiral scale. It's quantum, meaning there's nothing in between. There's nothing in between level 1 and level 2. In a gradual scale, there's a gradation where you move gradually. There's no gradation here. You're either at 2 or you're at 3, period. And it's a general scale. Again, you find a general level. Now, it's true that a person might use a different method of personal influence in a different situation.
Yeah.
But it is a very general thing. So, for example, if you go into a courtroom and pay attention to lawyers, you will see that they are trying to influence the court by reason, logic. That is what they do.
Yeah.
So the lawyer says, objection, no foundation. The judge says sustained. See, that's logic.
Yeah.
And they're trying to reason with the jury. When the guy makes his opening statement or his closing statement, he uses logic. See? That's not necessarily what he does all the time.
Yeah.
But it's certainly what he does every time he's in court or at a deposition or in the judge's chambers. So this is a general scale. You could argue that it could be called a specific scale because there could be different contexts, and there's some truth to that. A guy might use a different level in another context, but generally it manifests more as a general fact.
So it's more like the sort of default level for that person.
Yes.
Then they might use a different one in a different situation. And Mike, so supposing you've got someone who's a lawyer whose default is telepathy, let's say, but because they're a lawyer, for their job, they have to use the reason one.
Yes.
Is that going to create some inner conflict for that person?
It's not going to create a conflict. he will put the will into the jury. You will find my client not guilty.
I see. Right. So although they're using reason, apparently, they're using will strongly to weight the reason.
That's right.
they're using. Yeah.
I actually know some people personally who actually did that. They actually went to court and telepathically influenced the outcome of their case.
Yeah. I can imagine.
What is your defense against that?
Yeah. I dare say that on one of the other scales, there'll be some aspects that will allow you to be strong in response to that.
Yeah, but the way, see, if you yourself are telepathic, you just get that it's telepathic. You know, like you have a couple that meets, it's love at first sight. Well, there's a telepathic connection between them. Well, the guy says, I can tell that you love me. She says, you're right, I do. See, it's telepathic.
Yeah.
But if they're both at that level, they get it.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you try to do that with a person doesn't get it. He's not receptive to that.
Yeah.
You have to use a lower level.
Yeah.
You have to say, well, wouldn't you like to go out with a handsome man like me? That's level 3.
Yes.
Okay. So, and again, this has direction to it. Inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow. Telepathy is an outflow. I think that's fairly obvious. Your outflowing will, whereas charisma is an inflow. You draw people into you. It's like this magnetic thing. You draw them to you. But reason is an outflow. You're outflowing all of these beautiful explanations, logical explanation. Aloofness is an inflow.
Yeah.
I once knew a beautiful girl. As soon as she walked by, you could be right away. You could see how aloof she was. She was like, her message was, I know you all want me, and don't get your hopes up. She was restraining herself.
Yeah.
It was very obvious.
Yes. Yeah.
And because she probably had every guy who, she was, I don't know, maybe in her 20s, probably every guy who ever went around her since she was 10 years old probably tried to get a date with her, and she was tired of it. So she was aloof. That's how she came across.
Yeah.
And was always there. She was restrained. And then below that, you have domination. This is what you get from Adolf Hitler. Listen to his speeches. Dominate, dominate, dominate. We're going to overwhelm everybody. And then below that is victimization. This has become very popular recently. Oh, woe is me. I can't make it in society because I am fill in the blank.
Yeah.
All right. There's a glass ceiling. They won't promote me because I'm a woman, or they won't promote me because I'm a black, or they won't promote me because I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Okay. That's influencing people by victimization. Turn on the telly and you will hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's going to be some person there in the news, somebody in parliament saying, all these poor people are being victimized. It's a guilt trip. They're influencing you by a guilt trip. You see this, like, there's a story from a famous actor, big star, became a millionaire. And so he went to see his mom, and she said, well, how much money did you make from this movie? This is in the 60s. He said about $1 million. That was a lot of money back then. She said, you could have been a doctor. See? Now, she was running a guilt trip on him. See? She didn't want him to be an actor. She wanted him to be a doctor. My son, the doctor. See? So instead of saying, I'm so happy that you made all that money, she said, you could have been a doctor. So that's a guilt trip. And at the bottom is, martyrdom. This is the type of guy who makes a point of setting himself on fire to protest something. He has an influence. He influences people. You know, like a person is a member of like the Uyghur group who is oppressed by the Chinese. You know, he sets himself on fire to draw attention because it's in the news. So, you know, people do this that is the lowest level of personal influence. And of course, this is a scale of cause and effect.
Yeah.
Above level 1 is cause and below level 7 is effect. So the reason it's above and below, a human can never be totally at cause. He can be very much at cause. But he can't be totally at cause, so it's above level 1. And it can't be totally at effect. Even a catatonic schizophrenic is not totally at effect. He still breathes, he still eats, he still sleeps. It's a matter of very much at effect. So that is what the scale is measuring. How causative is this person? So when Elvis Presley went on stage, he didn't have to do anything. He just walked out there and 20,000 people went nuts. Why? He was charismatic.
He certainly was.
He was tremendously charismatic. You could see it on TV. You could even look at his photographs and see it, you know? He was a very charismatic person. And so that is a leadership function. Okay? So Churchill had charisma. He was a funny looking guy, but still he had charisma. And so the people of England followed him. He was able to lead them through that terrible experience by drawing them in. See, he didn't have to use reason and logic. His charisma was enough. When a person is charismatic, you want to be led by him. That's how you can tell a person has charisma.
Yeah. Wonderful. Jim, I think we've got time to very quickly look at one more scale before we have to wind up today.
Okay.
Would you like to go to the next one? Okay. Choice. Scale of choice.
This is probably more important than you can imagine. People think, sure, so what's the big deal here? Well, the biggest theme in human history is freedom.
Yes.
That is why we fight wars. That is what all the great books and the movies are about. Freedom, personal freedom, national freedom, you know, freeing the slaves, giving women the vote, you know, freedom. That's the big theme. Well, what is freedom? Freedom is the ability to choose. If you can choose, you are free. If you can't choose, you're not free. So you had a slave on the plantation in 1850. His power of choice was very small. He couldn't leave when he wanted to. He couldn't say whatever he wanted to. He couldn't pick his career, right? Because he was a slave. He was not free. Whereas the plantation owner, he could go to town when he wanted. He could eat what he wanted. He could dress the way he wanted. He could work what he wanted or not work when he felt like not work. So he had a lot of freedom. So that is what the scale is about. Now, this is a spiral scale. Level 1 is no choice, and level 7 is no choice. But at level 1, it's no choice is necessary. And at level 7, it's because no choice is possible. Person level 7 is oblivious. He has no clue. So you say to somebody, for whom are you going to vote in this election? He says, election? There's an election going on? See, he's oblivious. He doesn't even know there's an election. You know? This is like the type of guy he's either drunk all the time or he's on drugs all the time. He has no idea what's going on. And so he can't make a choice. He doesn't even know who's running. He says, yeah, there's an election going. We're going to vote for our members of parliament. Oh, who's running? See, how can he make a choice? He doesn't even know who's running. And if you tell them, well, it's Smith and Jones, he still doesn't know anything. No choice is possible. This guy has one viewpoint, and that viewpoint is whatever is he's stuck in. He's at that viewpoint. There are no choices. Now, if he goes up to 6, 6 is the group's choice. This is collectivism. This is what you get in communism. The people.
Now,
The People's Republic of China. Okay, it's collectivist. The people have decided they're going to do something. Well, that's kind of nebulous, isn't it? It's many viewpoints. It's the people. There's what, 1.2 billion people in China, right? Many viewpoints. So a choice is being made. It's made by the people. See, it's collectivist. Now, up from that is another choice. This is a robot. This person has one viewpoint, and it's the viewpoint that's dictated to him. So this is the guy, comes home from work. His wife says, change your shirt. The Smiths are coming over to play bridge. He says, yes, dear. And he goes and changes his shirt. That guy has one viewpoint. It's whatever his wife tells him. So the Smiths come over for bridge, and they say, we're going to the lake this weekend. Would you like to come? And the guy says, honey, would you like to go? She says, yes. He says, yes, would like to go. See, he's a robot. She is steering him around. These are the type of people who are very happy to have Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin run things because they just are a robot. So in the military, the lieutenant comes to the sergeant and says, dismiss the men and have them back at 800 hours, right? The sergeant says, yes, sir, and he does it. He's a robot. His choice is the choice of the lieutenant, and the lieutenant's choice is the choice of the major, and the major's choice is the choice of the colonel. See? So they're not free. Now, they're not in a collectivist context, but the sergeant tells the platoon, dismissed. From the point of view of the men in the platoon, that's the sergeant's choice. But it's only the sergeant's choice because the lieutenant gave him that order. So that's one viewpoint, the viewpoint of whoever is steering the robot. Up from that is anyone's choice but one's own. This is a little harder to explain. This is the person who is irresponsible. He does not want to make the choice. So if everybody has chocolate, he has chocolate. If everybody has strawberry, he has strawberry. So he goes to a Chinese restaurant. First person says, I'll take the chow mein. Second person says, I'll take the chow mein. Comes to him, he says, I'll have chow mein. You know why? Any choice but one's own. He's not responsible enough to say, I don't want chow mein, I want mugu gai pan. So there are many viewpoints here. It's the viewpoints of all the people whose choices you're relying on. So this is like the guy who goes to college. Everybody he meets is a liberal. So he becomes a liberal. Any choice but one's own. He doesn't even really have a political party. He's irresponsible. See? So there are a variety of reasons why somebody might do it, right? So this guy, all these girls are liberals. He wants to date them, so he's not going to buck them and tell them he's a conservative. He's just going to be a liberal so that he's not going to alienate them.
I think this one's very common. There was a funny little meme on LinkedIn a while back, and this meme said, "I'm really into the next thing."
Yeah,
Whatever it is that we're told it is.
that's right. So we go up to level 3. Now we're finally getting to a person who makes his own choice. This is somebody who the people at the lower levels will call selfish, right? So you go to an ice cream parlor. First guy says, I'll have vanilla. Second guy says he had vanilla. Third guy says he had vanilla. When you get to Joe, he says, I don't want vanilla. I don't want chocolate. He's making his own choice. And they will criticize him as being selfish. This is the lower scale people say, I don't see why you have to wear a bowler. We're all wearing hamburgers. Why can't you wear a hamburger like the rest of us? No, I want a bowler. I'm going to wear a bowler. It's my choice. It's one viewpoint, and it's his viewpoint. This is what we call a decisive person. He makes the choice. Okay? So he looks at the menu. It's got 40 things. He picks one of them. I'll have that. If there's somebody at level 4, he has a hard time with this. So he says, well, you order first. Okay, well, I'm going to have the salmon. The guy says, okay, I'll have salmon too. So again, just look at people. You can see these levels. 2 is any choice. This person is aloof. He doesn't really care. He'll have any choice. So this is the guy, if his girlfriend says, honey, I'd like to go for Chinese food today, he says, great, let's go. The next time he sees you, she says, I'd like to go for Italian food today, he says, great, let's go. Next time he sees you, she says, let's go for Thai food. He says, okay, let's go. He's aloof. There are many viewpoints, and it's whatever viewpoint the other persons want. He doesn't care. He doesn't care whether they say Italian or Chinese or Thai. See? Or if his wife says, you know what? I don't want to go for food. Let's go to a movie. He says, okay. Any choice.
So he's unattached as opposed to irresponsible.
That is exactly what aloof means. Unattached. He has an aloofness. And at the highest level is transcendence. No choice is necessary. Right? This is the guy who is in a spiritual state. He has one viewpoint, and that viewpoint is something like, all people are beautiful, and life is beautiful, and I'm free. It's like he has one viewpoint. It's a spiritual viewpoint, and he doesn't have to make a choice. He doesn't even have to choose. It's like you don't have. He doesn't. Even in his mind, he doesn't have to say, "I like vanilla better than chocolate." Even in his mind, he has to make a choice. No choice is necessary. So this person is free. Look at the axis. Above 1 is complete freedom and responsibility. Why is he free? He's free because he's responsible. When you accept responsibility, that enables you to be free. So at the bottom, there's no freedom and no responsibility. So that person at level 7 assumes no responsibility, right? He doesn't know that an election is going on. It is not being responsible. He has no responsibility for the government. So the result is he has no freedom. Whomever gets voted in is who he gets stuck with, so he has no freedom. It's just as if he didn't have the right to vote because he's not exercising it. So when a person is higher on this scale, he has more freedom and more responsibility. So you can see the guy at level 2, he wants his wife to be happy. So she says, look, instead of playing bridge tonight, why don't we all go bowling? He says, right, let's go. See, she has these many different viewpoints. Monday, she says bowling. Tuesday, she says, let's shoot pool. And Wednesday, she says, let's go to a movie. Those are many viewpoints. He doesn't care. He says yes. He's aloof. So, see, he's being responsible for her. He's not gonna say, wait a minute. We did that last week. I'm not doing that again. See, that's kind of not accepting responsibility for the other person. It's saying, no, I want my own choice, level 3. See, so a guy at level 3 is going to have more trouble having a relationship than the guy at level 2, because the guy at level 2 is going to go along with anything. She says, I don't like you in green shirt. She says, okay, I won't wear a green shirt. When she's not around, he wears it.
Yeah. I've seen that happening in couples quite effectively.
Yeah.
Well, I think that top one, number 1, is just a lovely description of a particular state of being, isn't it? That
Right.
experience of that's an experience of ultimate freedom, regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask me for my favorite. Kids do this a lot. What's your favorite color? Yeah. Or sometimes in an interview, people say, yeah, what's your favorite this or your favorite that? And I have to say, I don't really have a favorite. I mean, I could be just as happy with green as with orange, and just as happy with orange as with brown. It's just, I don't have, so, that's like any choice. Or it could even be no choice. You're not making a choice.
Yeah.
So, if you're in a transcendent state, you're not making choices. You're just being.
Yeah.
That is the native state of a spirit. An angelic, non-corporeal being is not making any choices. He doesn't have to choose who to vote for in the election. It's not only does he not make a choice, no choice is necessary. He doesn't have to make that choice. He's transcendent. It's like if I go out my house, there's plenty of anthills around here, right? I look at the ants, and these ants are very busy. Boy, are they focused, They're doing things. They're building things. I don't make any choice about that. See, I don't care whether this ant goes left, right, or not. It's got nothing to do with me. I just go past the anthill, and that's it. So you can stand aloof from that.
Yeah.
Or I might even be transcendent. No choice is necessary. So most people, to the extent that they have trouble understanding the scales, have trouble with the extremes. There are people who might not understand level 1. What do you mean no choice necessary? Because if the person is not transcendent, if he doesn't have a sense of transcendence, it doesn't make any sense to him.
Yes.
It's similar with number 7. What do you mean no choice possible? How could that be? They can't get that a person would be so oblivious that no choice is possible. If you go into a mental institution, you talk to a catatonic, you say he's not making any choices. You say to a catatonic, would you like me to sing you a song? There's no response. See, no choice is possible. He's oblivious. Now, some of the other people in there are a little bit better off. They might be able to actually make a choice. They might say, well, what do the other people say? Did they say they want to hear a song? You say yes. Okay, well, then sing. That's level 6. No. So you have to realize, as a person improves, she's going to go through each one of these levels. One of the axioms of this subject is you can only move to an adjacent level. It is impossible to skip a level. Think of it this way. If you're on the ground floor and you want to go to the 5th floor, one way or another, you're going to have to go through the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. Whether it's you take the stairs, the escalator, the elevator, or whatever. You cannot, sometimes it seems you skipped a level because you went through quickly or easily or did not notice, but you went through nevertheless. Most of the time when you go through low, you're aware of it. Sometimes I'm going along and I become aware of something interesting. I changed the level. See, and a certain scale and a certain area, I realize I'm now on a different level. Oh, that feels good. Yeah, at a higher level.
I imagine that just struck me because as I go through life, and other people I know as they go through life, sometimes will have an experience of something has just shifted for me significantly in my life. So I could imagine looking at these scales and thinking, that's the shift I've just experienced.
That's right.
And that's another nice way. Well, Jim, I would love to go through all 35 with you, but we can't. We don't have time for that today. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can see us at proper size. And there we are. What a fascinating piece of work. Honestly, it must have taken so much attention and care to pull this all together and put it into a book.
Well, the actual writing of the book took 25 years.
Oh,
Well, that was after a previous 25 years of research.
yeah.
You know, I
Well, hold on. That means you had older than I think. So how were you like 3 years old when you started?
well, it depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
You know, I was insatiably inquisitive as a child and still am. So I was searching and searching and searching and searching. I was always searching for something. And the reason I found this is because I'm a polymath. So I know so much about so many different things that I was able to see this for what it was when it fell out in front of me as a result of my work as human development engineer.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of work went into this.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful, wonderful work. Thank you so much for coming on. So let's remind people where they can find you, which is at septemics.com. And has there been because we've been talking for about an hour and a quarter, something like that today. Has there been like a favorite moment for you in our conversation today?
My favorite moment was when I saw your face on the screen.
Oh,
Because I think you're such a wonderful person. I feel better just seeing you.
oh, bless you. That's so sweet. Thank you very much. That's made my day. And would you like to leave the listeners and the watchers with some sort of reflection question to take into their week that may or may not be related to specifically what we've spoken about today?
Yes, let me say something that will bring this into focus for your viewers.
Right.
The data in this book are vital for every person. It can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Got it. I wonder how many times we have to hear that before we go, right, I'm going to buy the book now. So you're doing a podcast tour, aren't you, at the moment? You're going on different podcasts and going through this information with people.
Yeah, I've done about 325 interviews.
Gosh.
So I'm like going around spreading septemics the same way St. Paul went around spreading Christianity.
Fantastic. Except now you've got technology to support you.
Right.
And you don't have to go tramping up and down the dusty roads.
That's right.
To do it. So fantastic.
And I'm probably not going to get crucified for doing it the way they did to Paul.
Well, exactly. So thank you so much. And just to wind up for everybody, this is going to be all for Truth and Transcendence. You can find our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, and share with your friends. And also comment on what we were discussing today. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. And Jim, please stick around so we can have a little chat before we go. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.